Please mark your calendar now for our next roundtable, scheduled on Thursday, January 21st, 2016, when the roundtable will host Akron's newly elected mayor, Dan Horton. To make reservations for any of the Akron Roundtable luncheons or to purchase a subscription to our luncheon series, please visit our website at akronroundtable.org. Today, the Akron Roundtable is pleased to host Chuck Jones, President and Chief Executive Officer of FirstEnergy Corp. In recognition of our speaker, as well as the audience in attendance today, we have adapted the format of our luncheon to allow additional opportunity for your questions to guide today's discussion. The brochures at your table provide instructions for submitting your questions via your mobile devices using Quail technology. Questions submitted, which can be done at any time, will be posed to our speaker by our moderator, Dave Lieberth. We also have note cards, the old-fashioned way, at your tables that you can write your questions and just hold up your card. Before I introduce Chuck, just a few words about our moderator, Dave Lieberth. For those of you that don't know Dave Lieberth, he's a fixture in the Akron community, former deputy mayor of Akron. He's an author, a community volunteer, a patron of the arts, and I've heard him referred to as Akron's storyteller. So we're so thankful to have you with us here today. Now, I'm sure our distinguished presenter will talk about his personal background growing up in Akron. So rather than steal any thunder, I thought I'd give you a few basic facts about the company he runs, FirstEnergy, and in the interest of full disclosure, the company that keeps me gainfully employed. Headquartered here in Akron, FirstEnergy is a Fortune 250 company involved in the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. Its 10 utility operating companies, which includes Ohio Edison, form one of the nation's largest investor-owned electric systems. FirstEnergy's 15,000 employees provide electricity to 6 million customers, which covers 6 states, and basically goes from Toledo all the way to the Jersey Shore. During his 37-year career with the company, our speaker's vision, leadership, and dedication to safety and operational excellence have proven invaluable to customers, employees, investors, and our community. In short, when Chuck makes a commitment, he delivers on it. As an Akron native, he has been actively involved in many community organizations, including leadership positions with United Way, the American Red Cross, Youth Opportunities Unlimited. He also is past chairman of the board of the Greater Akron Chamber of Commerce and currently serves on the board of Team NEO and was recently appointed to the board of directors for the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Chuck is a loyal Cleveland sports fan, a topic that we do not have enough time to divulge into today, and an avid cook who enjoys spending time in the kitchen making Sunday dinner for his kids and grandkids, a pleasure he shares with his wife, Kim, who we're so happy is joining us today. It's a great honor for me to welcome, on behalf of the Akron Roundtable, FirstEnergy President and CEO, Chuck Jones.
Thank you, Mike. For the benefit of our history students from Hoban, Ohio Edison actually traces its roots to the late 19th century, and in 1899, when the Northern Ohio Traction and Light Company took over the company, Akron, Ohio had the longest electric railroad in the world. It ran between Akron and Cleveland. Wouldn't we like to see light rail today? But the modern Ohio Edison company that really became its present form right after the Second World War was headed by Walter Samus. And as I counted the pictures on the wall outside the corridor there, the 19th floor of the Ohio Edison building, I wondered that you, Chuck, are the 8th CEO of this company, and it has a tremendous legacy. How do you see yourself as a steward of this legacy for your customers, for your employees, for your stockholders, and for the public at large?
Well, I'm not sure if steward is the right word, but here's what I would say. And I've been very honest with our employees as we talk about the challenges that we're facing as a company. As I started talking back in January, I talked about several things we needed to do if we were going to remain successful. And the first 2 things that I talked about was keeping FirstEnergy's name on the building and keeping it headquartered in Akron, Ohio. And to me, that's probably still the top two things that I focus my efforts and try to get 14,600 employees focused on every day. We're in an industry that is under challenge. We're in an industry that's having a lot of consolidation. And so, to me, if we can achieve those two goals, and we hand this company off in a few years to the 9th CEO of FirstEnergy in a position where they don't have to worry about those two questions, I think that would be the single thing I would look back on and say that I'd be proudest of.
You grew up in Ellen, went to Richmond Elementary School, Ellen High School. What are the values that came out of that experience from your mom and dad, from your teachers in Ellen, that still inform your work today?
Well, the values came from mom and dad, I can tell you that. Worst trouble I'd ever get in as a kid is if I ever told a lie. You do a lot of dumb things, but if I got caught and I lied about it, hopefully Johnny Manziel gets this lesson at some point. But worst thing you can do is tell a lie. Second thing that my father taught me was, if you're going to do a job, do it right. And when he, especially during the summer, he was a lineman for Ohio Telephone Company. He'd leave us chores to do. First thing he did when he got home was inspect our chores. And if we didn't do them right, we were back out redoing them. So we learned to get them right the first time, so then you had time to play. And from my mom's perspective, I think, she taught us, there's 4 boys in the family, so she was a saint to grow up with 4 boys, especially us 4. But she taught us to care about others. And I think that you combine those 3 things, it's a good formula for pretty much anything you decide to take on in life. Honesty, hard work, and caring about others. And that all came from home. At Ellen High School, obviously, I got a good education. I was proud to go there. There's a couple of Ellen High School graduates, one of my classmates and one who graduated a year ahead of me that I've already said hello to today. So it was a great school, great opportunity, great education to help build upon to ultimately end up here, I guess.
Leaving Ellen High School, you went to the Naval Academy at Annapolis. Why there? Why did you become an electrical engineer?
I could take the rest of the discussion talking about that one. I was not one of those teenagers who said, this is what I'm going to do, and then ended up doing it, I can tell you that. So, one of the things growing up, we had a great life, but I somewhere along the line figured out my parents weren't going to be able to send me to college. I was the only one lucky enough to go to college. 2 of my brothers ultimately got 2-year degrees after they started a job and using tuition reimbursement programs and so forth. But I remember as a kid telling my dad, I'm going to college. And he said, well, okay, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to pay for it. So I did 2 things. I studied hard. I figured maybe you could get an academic scholarship. I worked hard at sports. I played basketball and baseball. Thought maybe that would be an angle. But at 15 years of age, for some reason, I started writing letters to Congressman Lieberth, talking about getting into a service academy. And every grading period, I wrote him a new letter. Sent a copy of my grade card, sent a copy of the fact that I made National Honor Society, joined the Akron Optimist Club as a junior optimist, built a resume, kept sending. And about halfway through my junior year, he called me and said, come on in, we'd like to talk to you. And I went in and they sat down, and we had a folder about that there, and he said, don't send us anymore. Where do you want to go? So I got an opportunity to go to the Naval Academy. Now, electrical engineering is interesting because I wanted to be a pilot. That's what I wanted to do for a living. And I chose the Naval Academy, and I thought, you got to finish in the top 15% of your class if you want to get into flight school. So that was a mission, and I was well within that bandwidth, but halfway through my sophomore year, my eyes went bad. And and so flight school was out of the question. When I got there, though, they asked an interesting question during plebe summer. You had to sign up for an academic curriculum. And in 1974, they said, what kind of engineer do you want to be? And I had never thought about engineering. But I am a Cleveland sports fan. And as a kid, I had a 2-transistor radio that I'd gotten as a gift. I took 2, we called earphones back in those days. They were called earbuds and everything else, but spliced them together to make a long cord. And I would sneak it into class, because the Indians games were always during the day back then. I had a radio in my pocket, I'd run the cord up my sleeve, down, I wore long sleeves to school. And my buddies would say, what's going on? And I'd say, well, Rocky Calavito just hit a home run. Boy, it broke and quit working. So I got on my bike, I rode down to Olson's Electronics, and I bought a transistor. As I opened up and saw one of the transistors was fried, soldered this transistor in, got it working. So fast forward to complete summer at the Naval Academy, and they said, what kind of engineer do you want to be? And I'm thinking, this whole thought about this radio and fixing it, that was pretty cool. I'll be an electrical engineer. And that's the truth about how I got started.
When you did join Ohio Edison Company in 1978 then as an engineer, I'm curious to know, what was the company like then as compared to what it's like today? What things are the same, what things are different?
The thing that is the same is the people. We have a company that has great people, and people that are concerned and committed to great customer service. They come to work every day. I like to tell our employees, and I know this, it's a family commitment. Whether you work in one of our power plants, if the unit trips off, it's all hands on deck to get that unit fixed and back online. When the lights go out, it's all hands on deck to get the customers back in service. And it's a family commitment to do that. I missed my first daughter's first Christmas because it was cold, blustery, 17 below zero, the winds were howling, and I had to go to work. And that's just what you did. It's just what our employees do. So that part is all the same. I think what's changed is it's become much more complex. It's much more complex in terms of the structure of the industry, in terms of the fact that we've got pseudo markets that are involved that affect some of what we do, the fact that there are a whole lot of new technologies that everybody's trying to figure out how to integrate into what we do, the fact that there are all kinds of newer, cleaner sources of power that we're trying to figure out how to integrate into what we do. So the business itself has gotten a lot more complex. But the real business, which is generating power, getting it to the customer, keeping the lights on and keeping the bills affordable, that part of it hasn't changed.
Speaking of complexities, in 2003, we had that large regional power outage that started here in Northeast Ohio on an Ohio Edison line. We had unprecedented damage from Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy in the Northeast, where you have power company in New Jersey. No longer is the electrical utility industry considered a safe haven for investors. I mean, looking at all these challenges, what kinds of lessons have been learned from these experiences?
Well, I have to correct you on one thing. The electrical engineer in me knows that power outage did not start in Akron, Ohio. And most of the lights in Akron, Ohio never went out. Cleveland did, but that's another topic. Safe haven for investors. I'm not sure it was ever a safe haven for investors. You know, I have a way of talking about investors. I've been talking to a lot of them in the last year, trust me. And I view them as they don't want to get married. If it's a woman investor, they want to date the most handsome guy they can find. And if it's a man, just the opposite. And when they're going into a restaurant with their date, they're looking around to see if there's somebody prettier or more handsome they can go have dinner with. That's what they do. And they're only going to invest in you if you give them the right story for why that's a good investment. The days of just investing for the dividend are long gone. So now, in our business today, our largest shareholder owns over 70 million shares of our company, 440 million total shares. So they must see it as a safe haven, or I don't think they'd own 70 million shares. But, you know, I just look at it, I look at that whole Wall Street facing part of what I do differently. I think we do the right things for customers. We do the right things for employees, and we do them in the right ways. That will take care of itself. And so I don't let it drive me. I don't let it be the center of what I do. It's an outcome. And so far, we're getting some pretty good outcomes by looking at it from a little bit more perspective.
A lot of news here recently. Within just the last couple of weeks, the Public Utilities Commission in Ohio has proposed a settlement case. It would have customers, including everybody in this room, to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in total of current rates to subsidize plants, some of which could not compete with natural gas-fired plants. So why is this reasonable for anyone here who's paying a monthly electric bill, and how is this going to impact on their future?
Okay, so as I said, this is a very complex business. I'm going to start real high level. In the United States, we just announced the closure of a 5th nuclear plant. So there are 5 now, they're being closed down. They're being closed down because they're in competitive markets, and the market's not paying enough money to keep them alive. At a nuclear plant, 1/3 of your workforce today is security, and they're armed with all the high-tech weapons that you can imagine. They have gun turrets. We do everything we can to keep bad people out of there. There are inherent costs that it takes to do that, but we're shutting 5 of them down. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's 5,000 megawatts. We have another view of we want to put less carbon into the atmosphere in our country. Those are going to get replaced with coal plants burning longer and more hours, higher capacity factors. Or they're going to get replaced with natural gas plants that emit half the carbon as a coal plant. And every one of them has life left in them. And I happen to think that we're going down a path that long term we will look back and regret as a country, like many other countries have done. Germany, just for one, they got rid of their coal plants over a decade ago. They shut their nuclear plants down and they tried to rely real heavily on renewables. Well, they found out that renewables generate at times when you don't need the power. Wind blows more at night than it does during the day. So they went through a period where they were paying customers to leave the lights on at night. So they had a sink for all that extra power, so they didn't have to make a ramp up the next morning. And so what we proposed to the Ohio Commission, I think, was a very thoughtful plan to allow us to transition to this future a little more gradually. I don't like customers to have to pay more either. But as I've told the Commission and I've told others, I see no future where customers aren't going to pay more. So let's take these plants. There were 2 plants involved. We just lived through, in northeastern Ohio, closing 2,200 megawatts of power plants. And you think, okay, they're closed. They were coal plants. Certain people say, hey, that's great. We got coal out of the environment. But here's what happens. These plants were built to serve customers. We spent $1.2 billion on new transmission lines and new transmission substations in order to make sure the grid would work correctly without those plants. It would have taken $400 million to keep those plants running. We spent $1.2 billion. That $1.2 billion flows to customers also. So in the case of these 2 plants, the Samus plant alone would cost over $1 billion of new transmission if it's forced to shut down. That $1 billion, if you flow it through to the average residential customer, is about $4.25 a month. This rate plan is about $3.50 a month. The other alternative is they stay in the competitive market, market prices go up, customers are going to pay more there. So under this plan, customers get several things. Plants stay alive, the jobs stay alive. It's 1,000 jobs, and then another 1,000 on top of that. that service the plants. They keep the taxes. And they get a guarantee that their prices will never go up more than that initial $3 to $5. And that guarantee comes because of the way this contract gives the power from those plants to the customer. So if prices go up, customers get the benefit of that, and their bills will actually start to go down instead of up in Ohio. So it protects the customer with an insurance policy that's less than $5 a month. And I tell people, those of us who have had teenagers with cell phones, many of us pay more than that to insure a cell phone every month. It's an insurance policy that they have energy, it's an insurance policy that they have reliable energy, and it protects them from greater rate increases if market prices go up. So under any of those scenarios, it lives or dies, customers are going to pay more one of those three ways. There is no option. You just can't unplug that plant. The lights will go out if that happens. That's the reality. So that's why I say it's a very complex business, and it's a business that we cannot let be decided by sound bites. And unfortunately, that's what most people get, because that's what appears in the newspapers, our sound bites about, oh, it's a dirty old coal plant. I tell people, you can call it old, but you can't call it dirty. We spent $1.8 billion on new environmental controls. The Samus plant removes 90+% of the sulfur dioxide. That's what causes acid rain. 80+% of nitrous oxides, 80+% of mercury. You can see this blue plume that comes out of the stack. It's pure water, basically. That's what comes out of that plant. Now, does it have CO2? Yes. And as we think about how to transition to a less carbon future, we need to do that thoughtfully. And part of our settlement actually is a commitment for FirstEnergy to look at a reduction in carbon over the next several decades, a 90+% reduction. So it was a good plan. You would never get the commission staff to sign on to something if they didn't see it as the right thing to do. And I like to say, whenever you're in a negotiation, when you're done, if anybody goes back into their own private room and is high-fiving, it wasn't a good negotiation. Nobody's high-fiving, but it's a fair settlement for Ohio, fair settlement for our customers, and a fair settlement for FirstEnergy, and it keeps those plants alive. The one plant, Davis-Besse, and you asked me about this earlier this week, got a 20-year license extension. To get a license extension approved from the Regulatory Commission, it is in many, many ways a brand new nuclear plant. It's got a new reactor head, new steam generator, new emergency reactor coolant pumps, new emergency generators, et cetera, et cetera. It's basically a new plant. And it would have been a shame for it to be the 6th nuclear plant in our country to get shut down prematurely.
You mentioned renewables, and our first question from the audience is, what are your plans to use increased amounts of renewable energy in the underline the word, in a significant way?
So I don't know what significant means, but I think we've always been thoughtful about how to do that. We own the output of 470 megawatts worth of wind generation today. We started that process back in 2005, I think. And how do you get the output? We didn't want to be in the development business, so we signed a power purchase agreement with a developer to take all the power. The developer takes that to the bank to get their project financing. They build it, they operate it, we take the power. 470 megawatts. Combine that with some of the hydropower and a little bit of solar so far. We're at about just over 1,000 megawatts of renewable power. One of the other things in the settlement that we got to with the staff is a commitment that we will come forward with a plan to build an additional 100 megawatts of renewable power in Ohio. So, not sure whether that'll be wind or solar or where it'll be. Might be a combination of both, actually, but we're going to increase our commitment to renewables. I believe there's a place for renewables in what we do, but you have to understand, it is intermittent. There's not a renewable source of power yet that generates 24 hours a day. At night, the solar gets working. At night, the wind starts blowing. If you have solar and wind and you integrate them in the right way, you can, but you are always going to need base load power generation that's available all the time for when it's not windy and it's not sunny. You're going to have to get the power somewhere. So you got to figure out how to integrate that all together. But we are committed to it. We have been committed to it. And I think you'll see us continue to incrementally add to that portfolio. So we'll be to a point where it'll be about 8% of our generation fleet. I think it'll continue to grow over the years.
A question from Tom, who may have seen Ted Koppel on the Stephen Colbert's show the other night about his new book about energy. And right here at this podium a few months back, Michael Morella, the CIA, expressed the same concerns about security of the grid. You mentioned it briefly with regard to your nuclear plant, but what about the grid itself? How secure is it, and is in fact this is something that people need to be concerned about?
I think it's something that we definitely need to be concerned about, and I will tell you it's something that our entire industry is concerned about. At FirstEnergy, we are doing a lot. I'm not going to talk about what we do. I will tell you what I tell our team, whether it's cybersecurity or physical security or grid security in terms of designing the grid in a way that it's got, additional redundancy and so forth, is we don't talk about it. Because if you start talking about it, you put a bullseye on yourself that somebody's going to say, we're going to prove it to you. But I give them an analogy of the two hikers that are hiking through the woods and they see a bear coming. And the one says, you see the bear? And everybody says, yeah, I see it. He bends over and starts tying up his shoelaces a little tighter. And he says, you're not going to be able to outrun that bear. He said, I know. All you got to do is outrun you. So our approach is, I want to outrun everybody else in our industry because there will be something happen at some point in time, and I don't want us to be the one that it happens to. There has been one attack on a substation out in California where at least 2 or 3 individuals used high-powered rifles and shot up all the transformers in this big station right outside of San Francisco. That's the only one we've had in our country. One of the things we're doing is investing a lot of money in transmission today, and we're investing in not just security, but as I said, additional resiliency. So there's a big outage over in Crimea right now because there was a terrorist attack. When you only have 2 or 3 lines that feed an area, you can take it out for a long time. But in the way our system's designed, it already has a lot of redundancy. As we invest and build more, you can create a whole lot of different paths and nodes so that it becomes more and more difficult to do anything that would be devastating over a long haul. But I do think, it's something we need to be concerned about. And we are. Our industry is, federal regulators are, every state regulator we deal with is, and it's getting a lot of attention.
I think some of us feel that Fortune 500 CEOs, of which you are one, are notorious for trying to protect themselves from hard questions from investors and others and protesters. And here last summer, when you had your annual meeting at the Knight Center, you walked right through up Mill Street, waded right through a crowd of protesters, stopped and talked to some of the protesters who were clergymen. It was kind of a remarkable change for some of us to view. Why did you do that?
Well, I will always talk to whoever wants to talk to me. And I think back, you asked about, there was a young engineer 35 years or so ago that I remember that had to give a talk in front of 300 people at Ohio Edison and was scared to death about getting up in front of a group of people. I knew that engineer. That engineer doesn't exist anymore. I don't know where he went. He doesn't exist anymore. But I've just gotten comfortable with, you know what, if you just are willing to tell people the truth and you're willing to listen, you shouldn't be afraid of having conversations with anyone. But I was down at our Samus plant about 6 weeks ago, stood in front of about 300 employees who are concerned about their jobs, concerned about their families. That's a tough conversation to have. Going out on the curb and talking to a few ministers who have some concerns, who are generally peace-loving people anyway, that wasn't that big a deal. It was way overblown. It just seemed like the right thing to do, so.
A question here about regulation, deregulation. Is it correct that FirstEnergy sort of stood alone against deregulation some years ago, and do you want to go back into a regulated environment?
So, way back, like around 1999, Senate Bill 3, FirstEnergy was one saying, we're making a mistake here. This industry was not intended to be deregulated. You need to fix the challenges that we were having at that time differently. And we, opposed that first bill. Along the way, the legislature passed that law anyway. Then they passed another one, I think it was Bill 221, that changed it even further. If you were going to be a strong company, you had to figure out how to adapt to that new environment, which we did. So we then became a competitive generator. We still have regulated utilities in all of our states. Here's what I would say. I think that either deregulation or regulation can work. But we don't have deregulation anywhere. We have a regulated market that our generation is in. And it doesn't allow the market forces to really do what it needs to do. Because of that, we're actually in a situation where we've struggled to get new generation built. And in January of 2014, we had something called a polar vortex. It was one of the scarier days in my career because it was 17 below zero. And PJM, the market that we're in, had a load of 140,000 megawatts. And they had 140,500 megawatts of generation available. And had one more generator tripped off on that day, we would have had to do interruptions of customers in order to keep the grid stable. We've done that. We did that in September of 13. But when you do it on a 95-degree day in September for a few hours, it's an inconvenience. I hate to have to do that to customers too. But if you do it on a 17 below zero day in January, it's dangerous. And that woke up the market. So between January of 14 and this year, they made significant changes to the market. But it was the federal regulator who made the changes, not market forces. And so the issues we're wrestling with here in Ohio, if you go, there are 11 states in our country that are deregulated. Ohio happens to be one of them. If you go to a regulated state, they are not wrestling with them. In Virginia, Dominion Power is building solar farms inside their utilities. And they're accomplishing the renewable issue by going to their regulator and saying, here's what we're willing to do. They get a compact. The regulator says, go ahead and do it. The regulator even gives the shareholders a premium rate of return to do it. And they're building solar farms to take advantage of renewables. In regulated states, you don't hear discussions about nuclear plants getting closed early. They're good assets. So the markets are not working quite right. And that's why, an 8-year bridge here, which is what our settlement does, it allows 8 years to get more progress and figure out how to let the markets mature.
A couple of questions here about your role as a CEO of one of Akron's largest employers. We have the mayor here, we have the president of the university here. You've signed on to a group to help advise the new mayor coming in, and Scott Scarborough as well. Tell us what you think about the future of our city, the future of our university.
Well, I think we have a great city. And, I've had the opportunity to know 4 of those 7 CEOs. John Way was actually CEO when I came to work for the company as a young engineer, but I didn't even know what a CEO was back then, quite frankly. I I got to know Mr. Rogers, who's here with us today, Will, Holland, Pete, and Tony very well. One thing I learned from all of them is that when you run a company like Ohio Edison, like FirstEnergy, in a town like Akron, your leadership has to extend beyond the walls of 76 South Main Street. You have to lead in the community as a whole. They taught me that. Hopefully I can do that as well as they were able to. So with some of the issues with the university, you know, I will tell you, I'm sitting in my office a little bit troubled. Not because I think Scott's doing a bad job. I was troubled because our community and our university weren't communicating. They were talking past each other on a lot of different things. And so I said, you know, I think there's an obligation that comes along with my position. Called up some of our counterparts. Every one of them said they were willing to help. And so we're gonna try to help and try to help bridge that gap to make sure the university stays part of a good community. You know, my life in Akron, I've spent my whole life here. I've seen it transition. I told you I rode my bike to Olson Electronics. You know, as a kid, we used to collect pop bottles, take them to the store, get 2 cents for the little ones, 5 cents for the big ones, hop on our bikes and ride down to the peanut shop, buy candy. It was safe, you could do that. There was a period where I didn't want to be anywhere near the corner of Main and Market Street. And I'm sure you remember those days. And that's transition. I think Mayor Pasquale did an unbelievable job with this city. But when you face those issues for 28 years in a row, eventually you run out of gas. And so I respect him for knowing that it was time for him to move on. Our new mayor will be successful. He's got a lot of challenges. And to the extent there's things we can do to help him also, I think that's a role we have to play in a broader community. If we just worry about ourselves, then I don't think we're going to be successful either.
You knew you were going to get this next question about the stadium that has your name on it up in Cleveland. Are you going to take up the Akron Symphony and its orchestra to swap your Browns tickets for a symphony ticket?
Well, I'm sure everybody probably knows I had a little bit to do with that whole thing out there with the stadium sponsorship. Here's what happens in the world that we're in. When Ohio is fully regulated, the power, the electrons that go on the wires to serve 2 million customers came from FirstEnergy power plants. Went on the wires, we delivered it, we kept the lights on. In a competitive environment today, of those 2 million customers, there's about 1 million of them that buy power from Detroit Edison, American Electric Power, Direct Energy, on and on and on. And like it or not, we're in a competitive business on that side of our company. If you're going to compete, you have to do things to work on your brand, to bring attention to your brand. And so, in hindsight, was that the best way to do it? We thought it was at the time. FirstEnergy Stadium has gotten a lot of notoriety. It's gotten a lot of exposure, a lot of opportunities for us to get our name out there. And if the Browns would win a few games, it would be a whole lot better. But, and hopefully that day will come. But it's not the only thing we've done. You know, we just got involved with the marathon. We've been involved with the soapbox. We have a charitable foundation, Dee Lowry, who runs it for us, is here today. She's got, I say, the toughest job in the company, by far the toughest job in the company. And the reason is because she likes to say yes, but for every time she says yes, there's probably 30 or 40 times she has to say no, because we can't support everything. But it's a multi-million-dollar foundation, and we support everything that we can support. And we've always done that, and we will continue to do that.
Well, we started off talking about the kind of company you'd like to hand over to your successor. You're likely to be the CEO of FirstEnergy through the end of this decade. What advice would you like to give your successor?
Well, I'm not presumptuous enough to say that will be, I made it through the first year, I'll give you that one. You know, I think as leaders, every leader needs to have the flexibility to put their own kind of signature on how they lead. And I've got a few years where I can do that. The things that I talk about all the time with our employees are two things: leadership and teamwork. Stephanie's story about moving the grinding wheel. That's how I want us to do things. And if we all chip in and we all work together as a team, you can accomplish great things. I think it was John Wooden who said, great things happen when nobody cares who gets the credit. Something like that. I'm not good at quotes, but it was pretty close. And that's the signature I want to put on it. You know, whoever the next leader is has to have the freedom to lead their way too, because I think that's what goes along with a leader. So I would never try to handicap that for them. And I try really hard. I mean, and my team, there's some of my team here knows that. I don't want to make any decisions today that handicap the next leader's opportunity to have the flexibility that they need. So, you know, it's a tough thing to balance. But I think the thing that will happen is, when you're a company our size and you've got 14,000 people who all know what their mission is and they're all pulling in the same direction, leaders get way too much credit anyway. I just believe that. I'm one person in a company of 14,000. I have a job to do. Happens to be doing this. It happens to be going talking to investors. But those people running those nuclear plants' jobs are just as critical. And those linemen that go out there and put the lights on when it's 17 below zero are just as critical. It takes every one of them for us to be successful. So hopefully I won't let this go to my head.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Chuck Jones.